Check, 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 sound check, 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 check. Check, 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 check.
All right, for folks in the room, for folks in the room and folks who I know are online, and I know we've got about 8 reporters online, we will start in 2 or 3 minutes. There's been a bit of commotion here at the climate conference, but we'll be ready to rock and roll in 2 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, I think one or, I don't want you to stand, I mean. Don't linger, stay here and come up? Yeah, I think so. Make sure, so Scott, I'm gonna be there. Okay, well, we'll do whatever you want.
Maybe,
Senator.
maybe
All right, folks, we're going to get started. For my colleagues who are all interested in talking to each other, we're going to tell you to stop talking to each other. All right, great. Let me invite our fellow speakers up here. I understand that we have 20 reporters on the line. We've got a few in the room, and we will take a few questions at the end. Welcome. I'm excited to see all of you, and thank you for being here. This is Climate Week in New York City. I think all of us have run from one end of the city to the other, but clearly with the recognition this week is about change, it's about momentum, it's about movement. And one of the things being noted everywhere I go, from speaking this morning at the Sustainable Finance event to moving to the Treasury Secretary's finance event shortly from here, to last night at the New York Stock Exchange when we were there talking about nature-based solutions, everybody was talking about the climate risk disclosure bills that passed in the state of California. And with me are the authors, the supporters, the heroes of that kind of progress that we just saw. So let me quickly run through what we're doing here. Again, my name's Mindy Luber. I'm the CEO of Ceres, a nonprofit that works with the world's largest corporations and investors to integrate sustainability into everything they do, into capital markets. We've spent the last 15 years trying to pass climate risk disclosure bills or have the SEC do that, but really what you have here are a group of people who aren't talking about it, but who made it happen. I don't need to regale you with what the costs are to our society, well beyond human suffering, to what it means to our economy to consider climate risk and what it means. On average, there was $1 billion weather and climate disaster event every 4 months in our country in the 1980s. By 2010, there was one every 3 weeks. This year, we've experienced more than $1 billion event every 2 weeks. And despite the clear impacts on our economy, on our supplies, on our workforces, on our infrastructure, and on our facilities, the risks of those instances, the economic risks, have been unknown. People are operating in the dark. I can tell you of the 700 investors we work with, they want to understand what are the risks from climate and what are the opportunities. They cannot make a decision about building a portfolio without adequate information. What we have today, and really this groundbreaking change that we are seeing with the passage of these two groundbreaking climate disclosure bills in California, of course, puts California out there on the vanguard, as they've always been. But they are doing a service to the investors we work with every day, saying we need to know the risk, we need more information. What we have here, with support from the environmental community and the business community, with Microsoft and Patagonia and IKEA and Salesforce, and the list goes on, supporters of these two bills because they're good for the economy as well as the address climate risk. The final thing I'll say is this is going to jumpstart what happens across the country in the United States. It will help, but it's also consistent with the SEC rule that's being considered. We hope to see a final rule in November or December. These bills will work well with them. These bills are consistent with what's going on in Europe. It makes great sense. No multinational company wants to disclose risks in one venue and something else in a very different venue. The authors of these two bills were brilliant in making sure they're aligned with everything else going on. This is our moment to catch up with the rest of the world. I'm going to invite the extraordinary champions to talk a little bit more about what's in the bills and why they're so important. And I'm going to start with Senator Scott Wiener. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, Mindy. And I really want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank Ceres for co-sponsoring this bill, along with Cal EnviroVoters, Carbon Accountable, and Sunrise Bay Area, but coming in early as a coalition of businesses and saying this is not anti-business. This is pro-business, and this is going to unleash enormous innovation in the corporate sector as companies, especially relating to SB 253 and 261, but particularly with with both of these bills, being transparent about their carbon emissions. This SB 253 does not dictate how they should reduce their carbon emissions, but by making clear that within a couple of years, these emissions are going to become public, the corporations have a huge incentive to innovate to reduce those emissions. And we're going to see in a few years who's walking the walk and who's just talking the talk. And I hope that after a few years before the implementation, the companies that are walking the walk are going to be a higher number than they are today. And so this is it's very exciting that the 5,500 publicly traded and privately held corporations in the US and abroad who are doing business in California are going to have to disclose their entire carbon footprint, including from their supply chain. They're not going to be able to contract out their carbon emissions and just disclose their core operations that doesn't really reflect the entirety of their carbon footprint. They're going to have to disclose the whole thing. And I think this is going to absolutely turbocharge innovation in terms of how corporations are reducing their carbon footprint. I want to just really thank our coalition, the sponsors who I mentioned, but also all of the environmental organizations and health organizations and the amazing corporate coalition behind the bill. I'll tell you, the opposition to this bill was putting out enormous misinformation about the bill and falsely claiming that it was somehow weird or new or impossible to implement or incredibly expensive. We had, the California Hospital Association, I'm going to call them out, was telling members that this was going to be so expensive to implement that it would take money away from patient care. Well, we know, because so many companies are already doing this, that it is easy to implement and that it is very inexpensive. It can be done in the tens of thousands of dollars. There are software that is low cost or free. This is nothing, we didn't create anything new with this legislation. We just said we're going to level the playing field and everyone is going to have to disclose their entire carbon footprint. And so, the strength of this coalition, especially with the corporations who made clear that this was something that they are doing and that is very straightforward and inexpensive to do, made all the difference in the world. I also just want to say we have in the legislature, we have it's just a great set of climate champions, some of whom are behind me today. I want to particularly thank Senator Henry Stern from LA, who you'll hear from, and Senator Lena Gonzalez from Long Beach. The three of us they were my joint authors on this bill, and we early on in the year said, let's do a big climate package. And 2 of the 3 bills are on the governor's desk. The 3rd will be on his desk next year, I'm confident, Senator Gonzalez. And along with Senator Min and Senator Becker, Senator Allen, and a few colleagues who aren't here, we stick together, and we are so deeply committed to changing the dynamic in the California legislature to make it consistently a legislature that engages in climate action. So again, thank you to everyone.
And next up is Senator Henry Stern. I think what I'm going to tell you, though, is this is going to turn from a press conference into a party. So this is indeed great news, and congratulations to all the sponsors. Senator Stern.
Okay.
Let's say one more thing. We were expecting that this press conference and the whole week would be making the case to the governor to sign the bill, and I'm just really want to publicly thank Governor Newsom. He has long been a climate champion. He gets it, and I think he saw quickly when this bill arrived on his desk that this was the right thing to do, and I'm just so grateful that he chose Climate Week to announce that. So thank you, Governor. Sorry.
Name to our party, but
We'll do it again.
yeah, well, I have a feeling our governor is going to be leading on this issue for a very, very long time, and we wouldn't be able to be in the position that we are if we didn't know we could push. So I'm Henry Stern. I represent the Los Angeles area. Been working on these issues for a while, and it's really an honor to be amongst this coalition with Mindy and Ceres, and to just get ourselves into a place where it shouldn't be a political risk to look at climate risk. Corporations are being bullied right now. Financial advisors, asset managers, our pension funds, they're all sort of being bullied by this strange version of economics that says, we'll all be better off if you just put your heads in the sand and pretend there's no wildfire coming, or that that bomb cyclone's not real, or that the floods aren't here on our doorstep. It's a strange know-nothingness that has taken over at least some of our politics. In a conversation where stepping up on empowering corporations to address climate risk, like in our legislation, SB 261, as well as 253 and some of the others, that you have to actually take a chance. And I want to acknowledge Mindy and Ceres for being brave about this, because when you're subject to, say, a witch hunt from the House GOP that is literally actively subpoenaing not just these organizations, but our own pension funds, and claiming that there's some cartel out there on climate, when it's actually the oil cartels that are funding that disinformation campaign. It's a dangerous time for truth in that regard, and I truly believe that the markets are up to the challenge, and this is one place where, as much frustration as we may have that corporations aren't doing more, I think they needed us to speak loudly and clearly and to make space here to say the fourth largest economy in the whole world is telling you that it's not just the UK and Japan and Europe and Canada, that America is with you. And if you want to step up and innovate, and you want to go deeper into your supply chains, and you want to show the world what you can do, what a carbon neutral watch looks like, or even carbon neutral milk looks like, or a carbon neutral pair of jeans looks like, or what a whole asset management portfolio can look like, I hope we've made some space. And I think this Biden administration has been brave on it, but I know the politics are hard. And when you listen to Vivek and DeSantis and all the rest talk like this about something seemingly as arcane, ESG, climate disclosure, why are they threatening, right? Like, because the truth is real, and that risk is there. And we're so close to a transformation. I hope these bills help push us over the top, and we go into a phase of American job creation like we've never seen before, of insourcing, of looking for carbon treaties and partnerships across the world, and I think we're on our path. So that's a very wonky way to start a party, Mindy, but that's my kind of party. So there you go.
Great. I think one of our former Supreme Court justices talked about transparency and openness being the answer to everything. These bills are not radical change bills, but their impact will be radical. They are saying, let us disclose the risks, let us have facts on the table so people can make decisions. And even some of the largest companies in California who will be bound by these rules, we're happy to stand up. So thank you to these two senators. We'll introduce a few others, but first I'm going to call on Chelsea Murtha, Director of Sustainability at the American Apparel and Footwear Company, and then on Mary Kreisman, the CEO of Environmental Voters.
Hi, everyone. I am Chelsea Murtha. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the American Apparel and Footwear Association. We are the national trade association for apparel and footwear brands and retailers here operating in the United States and globally. We represent more than 1,000 brands and retailers doing business. We were very gratified that we were able to come out in support of SB 253 after working with Ceres and Senator Wiener and his staff. In January this year, we launched something called our Threads Protocol. And the Threads Protocol was really kind of a set of tenets that we were looking at when we wanted to identify sustainability and social responsibility policy that would move the needle forward. And we committed when putting that out that we would support policies that met those requirements. And we were really happy to see 253 come to a place where it did meet those requirements. You know, for us as an industry association, it's very important to have harmonization among reporting requirements. We worked with Senator Wiener and Ceres to get language in the bill that made sure that if you were reporting to the SEC and that was a substantially similar disclosure, it would work in California. We were really glad to see pieces like that come together and make this a process that was really designed to help businesses succeed at this process. The apparel and footwear value chains are incredibly long and very complex. I think among industries, my members have arguably some of the most work to do when it comes to actually calculating and disclosing their Scope 3 emissions. But they are committed to that process. And you know, climate change, as I talk with my members, is something that is deeply threatening to, you know, the communities that we work in, the places we source from, and long-term business sustainability. And so we were really pleased that we could get to this place and very gratified to hear that Governor Newsom plans on signing this bill.
It is a party. It's a big party. It's a party 3 years in the making. Before I say anything else, I really do want to give it up to our legislative champions. The opposition on this bill was fierce. We say it, it's an existential crisis, and they're acting like it. The lies, we heard about truth from Senator Stern just now, the lies were rampant against this bill. And these legislators worked on this for years, got this passed, and are creating a world standard. So really, really do. We have the best of the best in California. Also really want to thank Ceres, Carbon Accountable, Green Lighting Institute, Sunrise Bay Area, our co-sponsors on these efforts. The truth is, this stuff is built over time, building power, building political power, overcoming our opposition, which is the most resource powerful opposition, takes time, it takes partnerships, it takes a lot of tenacity and resilience, and we're so grateful for our partners who helped get us here as well. So just really appreciative there. I would say, you know, we're all here at New York Climate Week, kind of trying to create a race to the top with other countries, with other jurisdictions on how we solve the climate crisis, what the solutions are. We are hoping this bill does the same thing, both of these bills. Disclosure and transparency is the first step. You cannot improve what you don't measure. And just as if I would clean up my house if people were coming over, and now that these companies know, and thank you to the governor for signaling a signing, now that these companies know that they are going to have to disclose their full carbon footprint, direct and indirect, they are going to start cleaning up their scopes of business now. They know it's coming in a couple years. We are going to see immediate transformation in what people do, because as soon as people have to show, they are going to start to fix it. And that's what this is going to do. So as we're here trying to create a race to the top on policy and action, we also are hoping what this bill does is create a race to the top on climate solutions and getting companies to be cleaner, greener, and more just. As we kind of talk about this right now, I'm really hopeful about it because of the leadership of Ceres, because of the leadership of Chelsea's organization, because of the leadership of Apple, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, folks stepping up and coming out this last year and saying, look, we want to be accountable to the world on how we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And as we start to see that, it's going to become bigger and bigger as disclosure becomes real. Some companies are going to step up, clean up, and really lead, and other companies are going to be forced to do the same. There's going to be pressure out there like we've never seen to change business as usual. So really, again, thank you to our leaders. In California, we know we're the fourth largest economy in the world. We can use our market power to make global impacts. So right now, if you're going to do business in California, you got to disclose your emissions. That's big. Thank you.
All right, we're going to do a quick round robin with a few other senators who are here, and then we'll take one or two questions. Let's start there.
Go with Senator Becker.
Well, I want to thank Mindy. I want to thank Mary, who's been behind basically all of the legislation that we passed the last couple of years. So I want to thank her for her efforts. As Senator Stern said, we are on the verge of a transformation. And we cannot let climate denial win, and we will not let climate denial win. And that's why we're here today. And I represent Silicon Valley. It was tremendous to see some of Silicon Valley companies come through and actually support this legislation and say that it can be done. I worked in software, with supply chain software many years ago. I got up on the Senate floor and said, we know this can be done. And with this legislation, it will be done. We will have the openness and transparency we need to make sure climate denial doesn't win. Thank you to all of you.
Thanks, Josh. Senator Ben Allen from Los Angeles. I'm just so proud to be part of this wonderful group of talented senators and so many great advocacy groups that have been leading the way. We had a bill just a few years ago that required CalPERS and CalSTRS, our pension funds, to take climate risk into account when they were thinking about their investments, SB 964, and it's just amazing to see how far this movement has gone. There was a time when it was so hard to get these bills across the finish line. I had a bill back in 2015 to allow for the AG to use unfair competition law to go against the oil companies on the grounds of their deception associated with their knowledge of climate change. We weren't able to get off the Senate floor. Now we've got our AG and governor standing together, launching this lawsuit that's changing the national jurisprudential conversation with regards to climate change. So there's been so much progress. I've been proud to be part of this effort, and I just want to once again thank everybody for being a part of this, and thank all of our advocates that have been helping to lead the way. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. State Senator Lena Gonzalez, proudly representing Long Beach and Southeast Los Angeles, as well as the Port of Long Beach. Really, really proud today to stand with my colleagues and all of our stakeholders here on SB 253 and 261 as a member who currently represents environmental justice communities who live near the harbor, who are seeing the emissions and feeling them every single day, the impacts of bad air quality, as well as the severe impacts, tangible impacts of climate change. This will deeply, deeply benefit my constituents and constituents across the state of California just by reporting these emissions, just to see where these businesses are. And it's incredible to know that thousands of businesses in California will now be able to do so. I also come to you as a former social responsibility manager for Microsoft. So I'm actually really, really excited that when I left this work, tech for good stance is what we would always say. When I left that work, to know that it's actually coming to fruition here in the spirit of ensuring that there's trust between business and community, and ensuring that there's also accountability as well. So with that, I say thank you to our sponsors as well as stakeholders, and thanks to my colleagues who did such great work.
All right, let's take a few questions before we all have to run to the next event. Let's go with the woman.
Hi, I'm Isla Binney with Reuters News Agency. I was hoping to ask a question that's a little bit, we talked about being wonky, but it's kind of for the business side of this, the application of it. If we're talking about having an SEC climate rule in the coming years, kind of interested to know how this would fit, how this law would fit, because as a business, if you're trying to report, for example, Scope 3 emissions to the California Air Resources Board, would you also choose to do that to the SEC, even if the SEC was not yet requiring it? And so, sort of, how would those two things interrelate? Would there be any risks to trying to report to two different boards, especially if the requirements are different?
Well, first of all, I hope that the SEC actually adopts the rule. I hope it includes Scope 3, and I hope that it's a strong version of Scope 3, so we all need to support the SEC in that effort. SB 253 goes beyond the SEC in a number of ways, including that we include privately held corporations, which the SEC does not regulate privately held corporations for the most part. So we have a provision, as I think one of the speakers mentioned, that if you are already filing in another jurisdiction, if it's everything that we require, you can basically staple that report with the audit and you're done. If you're reporting half in the other jurisdiction, you can staple that and then produce a report with the other half. So we try to make it as seamless as possible. I would hope that the SEC would do the same, and I would hope that all jurisdictions would do the same. We shouldn't be having people recreate the wheels. But I don't think there's any risk. I think ultimately they will file in wherever it's most comprehensive. That should suffice for other jurisdictions. And so The SEC is still in process, but I would hope that they would adopt a similar provision that we adopted in 253 to allow that seamlessness.
Have any of the businesses given you any feedback to suggest whether they would be expecting to share with the SEC anything that they're reporting in California that is not yet required by the SEC?
I think that's.
I think it's premature to do that.
Yeah, the one thing I would just say is SEC is a floor, not a ceiling. So if you want to go above and beyond, right, there's safe harbor if you're going to do material scope 3 risk with SEC under the current proposal. But if you're going to go above and beyond, there's no impediment to that, right? So maybe it's a more stable reporting framework, but it doesn't bar that.
And also, I will just say with Scope 3 and SB 253, for the first 3 years that Scope 3 is in effect, there are no financial penalties, and we did that. That was a late amendment we made, just to be clear, we're not trying to be punitive. We know that in the first few years, it will be probably a learning process for the companies and for the state. And then when the penalties do go into effect after 3 years, we also have a safe harbor. We're not trying to have a gotcha moment. If they are in good faith filing and there's a mistake or an omission that was in good faith and reasonable, then there's a safe harbor. You can just correct it and not be penalized.
Helen, how can we take questions from the audience? Are you handling that? Oh, I'm sorry, from those online. Okay, I think we're then going to take a couple more questions here and move on. Go ahead, the gentleman in the white shirt.
Hi, Richard Vandervoort from the Wall Street Journal. Question for Senator Wiener. So the logic of an SEC disclosure is that investors are entitled to this kind of information, but private companies have different owners. So I was wondering if you could talk about why the state is entitled to this kind of carbon accounting from private companies.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're doing business in our state, and climate change is real, and their carbon impacts are causing harm. And I think it's not just investors who have a right to know. I think the consumers have a right to know. Private investors have a right to know, even if it's not a publicly traded company. They still likely do have investors. They have lenders, and so there's a public interest in having that kind of information out there. And again, these are all companies doing business in California.
And just to follow up, were you? Was it in your mind that the idea of public companies brown spinning certain dirty assets to private companies, sort of getting them off their books that way, and so you're trying to bring more into the scope?
I think we were just wanting to be clear that if you're doing business in California, whether you're publicly traded or not, if you have the $1 billion revenue threshold, the public is entitled to know. Yeah.
Thank you.
We were concerned that if there was a huge push to get rid of Scope 3, that would just make it easy for companies, public or private, to contract their emissions out to third parties and not have to report them. And so we made sure that that loophole didn't exist.
And one more thing, Richard. So Senator Gonzalez lives in one of those highly intensive oil drilling areas in the state, right? So what's happening in the trend in our industry in that space, for instance, is you're spinning off from, say, Exxon or Chevron into private equity owned smaller asset managers who are then sort of taking these depreciating or these assets that maybe are losing value but may not be accounting for carbon. And so everybody's in now. Everybody's in.
Okay, let's take one more question. Then I know this room is destined for another event. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rosalind Helfand. I'm based in California, but I work in global environmental policy. And I've experienced quite a bit of international interest in this bill and excitement about it. And I'm wondering how you see this work becoming a global model for other activities by governments.
Well, we're going to Dubai. So California legislature will be one of the subnational governments present in Dubai, and hopefully, from the last UN report on what high integrity emissions reductions framework could look like as the voluntary carbon market sort of falters and private sectors looking for places to land that are stable, that they can actually count on emissions reductions, perhaps in an integrated framework between the US, what the ISSB is doing in the EU, what's happening in the UK, Canada's new procurement order, Japan's got an order. that maybe in the absence of the ability for unified American leadership at a federal level, maybe this subnational leadership can kind of stitch together a bigger global partnership, and then it's private sector leadership. Then we don't have to wait on Congress. But it'd be great if Congress would act. It just, this is a way to get that work done. So we'll be out there, despite the venue. We'll be out there.
If I could just add something to that real quickly, too. What's so powerful about this policy is that it is international policy in a lot of ways. This is going to apply to a lot of international companies, right? So having that data available is a really powerful lever for other jurisdictions to use once that data is available. In addition, we've heard from a number of companies in the past few months who say that, look, if California does this, it's going to impact so many companies that if we try to do it as a country, it'll be a lot easier for us to pass because there'll be a lot less opposition because they already have to do it for California. So not only is this now, even if no other country or jurisdiction passes something, they can leverage this data for policy change, regulation, incentives, period. That is done with California's action. But also, this opens the floodgates for other countries to be able to take the lift and have it not be as big of a lift and start to really create that ripple effect. And because this is national policy, all US-based companies, our federal government can do the same in procurement decisions and other things as well. So we, the beautiful thing here is we don't have to pass a lot of other policies to make this immediately impactful and leverageable for change.
Right. I think we could say with absolute certainty, we will leave Climate Week with dozens of highlights of accomplishments and success stories, and this will remain at the top of it. This was a Herculean lift. Having more information that allows every company to manage their emissions and their climate risk better. The 700 investors that we work with, having further information on the risk will make sure that not only do we have better transparency and disclosure, but it will lead to change within those companies in inordinate ways. I think we know that this is a great success. I want to congratulate all of those from California on making it happen. Quite extraordinary. All right, who's got the camera? Do we need a group picture here?
Did you get a shot?
Yeah,
guys, you got a shot.
got a lot of shots.